Hey, everybody, welcome to Signals in Higher Education. I'm Darin Francis with Harbinger Lane. And today we're going to be discussing a one-year alternative to traditional college that trains AI first employees through 100% experiential learning. But first, let me introduce you to Jeremy Smith, co-founder of Pega6. Jeremy, welcome.
Darin, thank you for having me. Appreciate it. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, look, before we kind of launch into learning about Pega6, you've been on the employer side hiring top talent directly out of universities. What was your experience like?
I mean, the funny thing is, I've experienced it on both sides, as many of us have, where I was the person coming out of college who had no idea what I was doing when I entered my job. And then after a couple of years, and for the rest of my career, I've been hiring people coming out of college who don't know what they're doing. On the one hand, the experience is somewhat rewarding, right? Because it's very fulfilling to coach and mentor and grow people. But on the other hand, I have always found it to be, and any company I've ever talked to has always found it to be a drag on resources, right? Where there is just a year-long period where you are putting more into the employees coming out of college than you are getting out of them. And it isn't about until that 1 year mark where it then flips and they start to add value. And, you feel proud with what you see coming out of them because you put a lot into that, but still it's a lot of resources to do so.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I think it's just important to get your a little more of your background and your context here. So you mentioned you and your co-founders each have 20 to 25 years of experience building companies, managing teams, hiring employees. So talk a little bit about your journey to this point and sort of what's led you to create this new concept, this new company, Pega6.
Yeah, it is interesting. So I started my career in investment banking, having no understanding of how to do finance. And I learned everything that I learned in investment banking on the job. And so that was sort of my first inkling. And by the way, the people who were in my cohort in investment banking, they did have finance backgrounds, finance majors, but they were starting at almost the same 0 point that I was, because what they had learned hadn't in finance in college hadn't prepared them for investment banking. But we learned from a fire hose at our first job, and I think that planted the seed for hold on, something is maybe a bit disconnected here. Then I was in private equity for a couple of years, ultimately bought a company with my boss and her husband to turn it around and turn the company around, which was great. Then the 2008 financial crisis hit, and I turned it around again. Wrong direction that time. And we ultimately had to wind the company down. And that's when a friend of mine from college, and we'd worked in investment banking together, that is when he asked me, hey, do you want to come join my fintech startup? It was called Second Market, and help me as the chief strategy officer and help me scale this thing because they only had 24 maybe employees at the time. And so I did, and we raised a couple of venture rounds, hired 150 plus people, and ultimately exited to the NASDAQ because we had created the first ever private company stock exchange. So obviously something of interest to them. But so we did a lot of hiring there as well and had to do a lot of training and create a training program essentially, which is tough for a tech startup at the beginning when you don't have the time to give, you don't have the money to spend, and you don't have a bunch of people who you can throw at the educational process of the new people coming in. And so that was another sort of inkling that something was awry. And that was actually when I came up with the idea for Pega6 and the concept of career accelerators was in my last year or so at Second Market. So this was 15 years ago. But the timing wasn't right for sort of a university alternative. People thought college was too expensive back then, but nobody really questioned the value that college provided. And so the pain point just wasn't where it needed to be. And so I said, okay, this idea is too early. So I just put it on the shelf, and that was that. Then when we sold to the NASDAQ, I'd been in New York for almost 15 years. I was ready to leave and wanted to get back to the Midwest. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio originally, and ended up picking Kansas City. And here in Kansas City was the COO and president of an insurtech startup called Risk Genius that we raised a couple of venture rounds, hired a bunch of people, experienced that same skills gap and upskilling that I did at Second Market. And but ultimately had my second exit when we sold to a older, larger insurtech, who then a couple months later sold to an insurance carrier. And then after that, I was the COO of a fintech startup, also here in Kansas City, called Lotus Markets, and was there for 3.5 years as the COO. Again, hiring, upskilling, same sort of gap. And it was around that time, maybe 2 years ago, when I saw that there had been, well, I'll say 3 to 4 years ago, there was just this explosion in dissatisfaction with universities from parents, from students, and from employers. And it was a large segment of the population. And that drumbeat just kept getting louder and louder over the years until about a year or two ago, I said, okay, this is the time. This is the time to create a competitor to universities because the market is demanding it in a major way now. And so I left Lotus Markets earlier this year to fully focus on Pega6 and launch it next year.
Wow, that's awesome. So you've clearly established that you've had many opportunities to be on the hiring side. And I guess, and yet I know where we're headed here is a conversation about an alternative to university. But it's an alternative to university, not for, a skilled labor job. It's an alternative to university for what typically would be really in the university lane of, preparing students. And so I wonder, as you really kind of sharpen this concept, and we'll get into it, we'll get into more of like what exactly you're providing. But when you've done all this hiring, what distinguishes or what has distinguished somebody that can really hit the ground running versus someone who took longer to get into the role? I mean, is it really purely identifying maybe a certain set of skills? Walk us through a little bit more of what you think that diagnosis tends to be, and or is it really widely dispersed and differentiated?
So I would say that I've never run across anyone who's from an entry level perspective who's ready to hit the ground running. And I think, I know both my co-founders and honestly any employer I've ever interacted with has experienced the same thing. And it's really about how quickly, well, I'll say, can they ramp up or not? It's a little more binary than how quickly they can ramp up. And I say that because what we have found to answer your question first with the universal sort of characteristics, they've been less skills based in the past and more potential based. And that potential was really made up of two or three things, which is a base level of intelligence, right? There doesn't be a genius, but you have to have some, you know, smarts when coming into a job. Two, that they have grit and drive, just because it takes a lot of work to go from 0 to 1 as a person on anything, whether it's a job or learning the violin, whatever it might be. It takes a lot, and there are a lot of setbacks, and so you need to have that grit and drive. And then lastly is an intellectual curiosity. The kids who ask questions, who would dig into things, who would be thinking about these things, not just when they're in front of you asking a question or doing a task, but they're actually curious outside of the task or the workplace. So those, I would say, were the kind of the three tags for those people who we thought could ramp up. And largely, when you talk about or who can ramp up more quickly, what we found are two things. That one, it is almost a universal truth that it takes 1 year to ramp up. It takes 1 year to go from 0 to 1. And for pretty much anybody who we've ever spoken to, even outside of Pega6, just in the years of our lives and have experienced ourselves, it's about we've all started our jobs as a 0, not knowing what we were doing by and large. And it's around the end of the first year in our first job when pretty much everybody goes, okay, I think I got this now. Not from like a director or a VP level, but from an entry level, right? It's around that timeline. And as an employer and any employer you talk to, they say the same thing, right? 9 to 12 months until the new employee is able to add value. And so what we find is, although there are some people who perform better earlier on and so on, but to do the true ramp from 0 to 1, it takes a year. And you're either able to make that ramp or you're not. And that's when I say it's a bit binary. It's not so much about how quickly the people with those three characteristics ramp up, because it pretty much takes everyone a year, or you're not able to. It's just not the job for you. And so you move on to another job.
But there's so many ways that AI enters into this, right? There's the scarcity of jobs that potentially is going to incur uh, over some period of time. There's the enhancement of a role that AI can do. Um, there's also the way in which AI, once you're in a role, can actually disrupt the work that you're doing, right? But I guess I want to throw that wrench into your plan to be like, gosh, how are you guys even thinking about AI, about the context that you're entering the market? You're entering the market not just in a downturn economically, you're entering the market into variability. Yes, yes. So talk a little bit about how you see AI in this, and you can go any direction with that that you'd like.
Yeah, no, it is hugely impactful. It's at the center of our thoughts, and really in two ways. At the student level, or student slash employer level, because it accrues to both of their benefits, we are making sure that the students we produce, or the graduates, I should say, that we produce, are AI first. The way we describe it is they're AI first entry plus employees who come with the technical and soft skills of a second or third year employee from day one of their first job. And there's a reason that AI first is the first word in that description of our graduates, and it's because it is critical, right? It is critical as you enter an era where there is a paradigm shift. If you want to be producing people who are relevant and can thrive in that era, they have to be masters of that, whatever is causing that paradigm shift, right? Whether it's the steam engine or the car or the computer, you or the internet, you just have to be a master of it. The way, one of the analogies we use is that we are producing lumberjacks who are masters of the chainsaw, not the handsaw, right? Because that's what you need to be. You cannot shy away from that technology. You can't even be neutral on it. You must embrace it. It's the only way you can produce people who thrive in that new era. And the second way that we look at AI, above and beyond what we are turning our graduates into, which employers obviously benefit from as they have a 100x more productive and effective employee. But we also look at it from our own business model, which is, one of the things we call ourselves as higher ed for the AI age. And one of the key characteristics, as we see it, as I see it, of higher ed for the AI age is it has to be incredibly agile. It has to move at the speed of AI. There are going to be skills, tools, entire career paths that disappear and emerge overnight. And as a post-secondary institution in that world, you have to be able to adapt just as quickly. And so I won't touch on it this moment. It's something we can talk about in a little bit. But the way that we have structured our program, our curriculum, is what we call a contentless curriculum. We are able to pivot within weeks or even days in, again, skills, tools, or entire career paths.
Wow. No, I love it. It's pretty lofty to go to think about the Pegasus, you know, and you're talking about $1 million employee versus the $1 billion unicorn. That's where Pega6 comes from. What made you think that you needed to rethink this from scratch? Like, why not advocate for enhancement or build a change into the existing system?
Right. Wow. That is a big question, to which there are a lot of pieces. So I will try to keep it as brief as possible. This is a 4-hour episode, right?
That's right. Yeah. No, and actually, in fairness to you, I'm throwing you loaded questions, but
No, these are great.
you have a very lofty, disruptive proposition, and it's exciting. It's also terrifying, right? And but we're also sort of in a terrifying moment in a way, right? We're in a moment where we're even if you're going to work within the system, it's got to be a pretty disruptive idea in order for it to pierce through. And there are many that are trying that angle, right? And so
Right.
I give you your lane. Your lane is purely I'm outside of it. But was there a moment that you thought maybe we could do this inside the system?
Yeah. There was not. And the reasons for that are because, so I'll give a brief description of Pega6 because then it will make a little more sense as I talk about why I couldn't see sort of changing the system and it really needed to be outside of the system. So at Pega6, we are creating a entirely new type of higher ed that is, we call them career accelerators. And each accelerator is focused on a single career path. It is 100% experiential, no lectures, no textbooks, no texts. It is 1 year, 15K, and the students graduate as you're referring to, that $1 million employee, the Pegasus, which is that AI first entry plus employee with the technical and soft skills of a second or third year employee from day one of their first job. And so with that context, you have to think, okay, this is a radically different approach. In fact, it's funny, you talked about the skills, the trades before. Another name I have for this category we're creating, other than career accelerators, I also call it white collar trade schools, because that's very much what it is, very similar to a trade school. But instead of focusing on blue collar jobs like plumbing or HVAC, welding, we focus exclusively on white collar careers, starting with software development and product management, and then expanding beyond those roles eventually. And so when you look at the university model, it looks nothing like that, right? It's not experiential. It's not focused on a single career path. There are all sorts of the liberal arts subjects around it, or at the core of it, and they're taught by professors rather than our staff are more the proto bosses of the students, right? They act more like a manager than they do a teacher. Again, no lectures or textbooks. So when you look at the radical differences between our model and universities, you then have to ask, okay, culturally, if we're going to try to make this work in the university system, culturally, do I see universities making this radical of a change? And I don't. I don't. Historically, obviously, it's not something they've been good at, radical change. But then it would also mean a lot of the people there would be out of jobs, right? Whether it's the removal of the liberal arts component and all those professors, or whether it's a replacement of uh, professors who have not been in the workforce uh, for a long period of time, with former managers and professionals. And then also, so you get all sorts of pushback, understandably, from that stakeholder within universities. And then also you have to change the entire curriculum, right? There, you get rid of all the textbooks, all of the lectures, and it becomes 100% experiential. And with that radical of a change, the colleges just don't have the culture, and there would be a large degree of understandable self-preservation taking place that I just don't think they would want to make that dramatic of a change. But the second issue is, even if they wanted to, I don't believe they can. Uh, for anyone listening who's read The Innovator's Dilemma, it really fits squarely into this construct, which is they have continued to move up market, adding features, and become more and more expensive, more and more, or higher and higher margins, and they've become bloated. And so even if they said, you know what, this 1 year 15K model is completely, this is the way, this is how he's right, this is how it needs to be done, they couldn't make that pivot because they would collapse under their own weight. They have too much infrastructure to be able to support a 1 year 15K program. It just couldn't support all of that infrastructure.
It makes sense. All right, look, let's because it's not going to be a 4 hour podcast. I'm gonna have to zoom past some of this, but I do think that we should talk a little bit about what a student is going to get and what they should expect for that 1 year, right? So I'm gonna dive in for 1 year. I'm graduating from high school and I'm walking into. I'm assuming this is a recent high school grad we're talking to, right?
Correct. This is a graduating high school senior. As a instead of going the college path, it's go the Pega6 path. Yes.
And then, actually, before you tell me about what their experience is, how do you envision recruiting them?
Yes. So initially, because we're focused on software development and product management, and then eventually some other tech career paths, and then eventually beyond tech career paths. But initially, we're going to be focusing on specialty STEM high schools, because these will be, it acts as a great double screen to start, right? Where it's high performing, highly motivated, highly focused kids who have already self-selected for the tech path. And so that's initially how we're going to be recruiting for the first handful or two of cohorts.
Pitch me as the student that's going to walk into this experience. Like, what am I really signing up for? And like, is this something I can handle part-time? Will I do a full-time job? Is it something that I'm going to dive into just the same way I would have for college, full-time, or is it, something in between?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So first, I'll start at the high level and then work my way down. The first thing that we tell students, as we've just entered now the recruiting phase, is, and as well as telling their parents this, which is, you start your career 3 years earlier than if you would have gone to college, and you end up 350K ahead of where you would have been had you gone to college. Because after 4 years, right, you pay the $15,000, or maybe you take on debt, but then the next 3 years, you're making meaningful high five-figure income. While over the course of that same 4 years, the college grad just continues to accumulate debt. And so when you look at the delta at the end of just the first 4 years out of high school, you are $350,000 ahead. And the truth is, even though you started your career 3 years early, you are 4 years ahead of the college graduate, because you start your career job ready from day one. There is no ramp up period. You are ready to go from day one, whereas the college grad still has that year of ramp up ahead of them when they join the employer. So you start your career 3 years early, but you're actually 4 years ahead. And for the first few cohorts, we are going to have employment guarantees if they graduate. And so that's sort of the third benefit or selling point, if you will, that we'll have for the first 3 or 4 cohorts to begin with. Then from another perspective that what am I going to go through? What am I going to get? The way we developed the curriculum, the contentless curriculum that I talked about, which is essentially these kids will spend, and this also goes to your other question, they will spend 50 hours a week, every week for an entire year, learning to build software by building software, right? So the curriculum is a 12-month regimen of software builds that through building it, they will be learning it. And that model, honestly, is based on all of our experiences in the real world. Again, when we all joined our first jobs and we made that ramp from 0 to 1, we didn't sit in lectures or read textbooks at our employer. We learned to do the job by doing the job. And that's really what we're doing here, is replicating year one of employment. And so to your question, it does need to be full-time. There's no opportunity for side gigs or anything like that. It is a full-time, intense 1-year program, because that is what you need to achieve mastery. Anything less and you will not achieve mastery. It was one of the shortcomings of boot camps, who didn't quite deliver on their promise. And it was because they were dealing mostly with career switchers. Career switchers have mortgages and car payments and families, so they must earn income. And so the boot camps, to accommodate their student body, had to make it a 6-week course or 3 months or a year, but part-time. And again, we've just found it to be universally true that it takes full time for a year to hit mastery. And the way that we demonstrate that to students, and this now loops back to when I was talking about building our curriculum, before we determined what 12-month regiment of software product builds we should be doing, I said to my 2 co-founders, I want you each to create a resume for the perfect year 2 software developer and perfect year 2 product manager. And then we will work backwards from there. And we'll know what 12-month regiment of product builds it takes to get to that Pega6, right? To that $1 million employee that you have just outlined. And the second benefit of that is that we can show it to the students and say, this is who you are going to be when you graduate. So we don't talk about it in vague terms. We say to them, this is you in 12 months. This is your resume that you're going to be able to take around in 12 months, which also, by the way, is the product demo that we have for employers. We say, this is the employee that we're going to be delivering to you, right? And so it creates a tremendous amount of not only quality, because you can see the experiences and skills that are going to be on this person's resume, but a tremendous amount of consistency too. As a student, you know what you're going to become. As an employer, you know what you're going to receive.
Yep. Wow. So you're painting a really clear picture about the student experience. We're going to get to an employer guarantee or employment guarantee piece of this, but when they're building something, software as the example, are they building for a specific company? Like, are they building is this a simulation or is this a real world scenario? And how do you think about that?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. And the short answer is they are high fidelity commercial grade simulations.
Okay.
Because there are 2 main reasons why, well, maybe 3, why we said, okay, we're not going to work with employers to have students work on their products. We're going to create our own self-contained regiment of product builds. And one of the reasons is because working with employers doesn't scale. Because as you're working with employers, that means every cohort is going to have a different set of employers they're working with, or different products they're working on different products they're working on with those same employers, same product, different stage. And because of that, we wouldn't know what problems each cohort is going to run into when, or what the solutions are. And so it would require a tremendous amount of involvement from our staff working with the students, and that just doesn't scale. But if it's our own product regimen that we can reuse for every cohort, then we're going to develop the pattern recognition to know exactly what issues emerge when and what the solutions are, so that we can develop scalable ways to address them. But also, the reason that we use our own product regimen is because it ensures that there are no skill gaps. Because as we outlined this, this Pegasus, this perfect employee, well, if it's different employers or products every cohort, I mean, in all likelihood, certain of those product builds that a given cohort is working on, they won't have all the skills and experiences that we know make up the ideal employee. And so there are going to be gaps, and there'll be different gaps for every cohort. But we don't want to release products, students into the market who have gaps. So if we have our own product regimen, we can be sure that they're getting all of the vitamins and minerals, so to speak, that the perfect entry plus employee needs. And so, so those are the main two reasons why, we work with, or why we've developed our own product regimen rather than working with employers. And, the third reason is just as important. One of the problems that employers have had with colleges is that they're getting zeros that they are entirely responsible for turning into a one, they, the employer. Well, if our students are working on employer products, it might be a lighter lift, but it's still going to be a meaningful lift for employers. They'll need to dedicate some time, money, and resources to making sure that these students are, who are working on their products are doing the right things in the right way. Versus what we're saying is it's no lift for the employer. We take the students all the way from 0 to 1, and we hand employers a 1.
Yep. Yep. So let's talk about the employer. Let's talk about sort of the what you've had to do is actually create an employer guarantee strategy in order to get going, right? Makes total sense. So talk a little bit about securing the employer guarantee. Talk about the employer side of this equation, because we've been talking about the student all along. Tell me about what your experience is with these employers, these potential employers that you're hoping to work with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, we knew as our go-to-market strategy that, well, I'll even take a bigger step back and say, of the two sides, employers and students/parents, both sides are important, but the employer, they're the more important side. They are ultimately the customer, because in the end, where employers hire from first with the best, highest paying jobs, that's where students will go. That's where parents will make their students go. And so we knew that we had to, for at least the first handful of cohorts, lock in the employer side of things. Because as we were just casually talking to parents, they would all say, "Oh, I love this model, and this is great, and I would love to send my kid to this. But will employers value this? Right? Will they see this as a valid path?" And so there were really two ways to go about it. One is the employment guarantees, and that's where we have been reaching out to tech employers who need software developers and product managers, and saying to them, "We need you to guarantee one job for just one graduate from one of our first cohorts." And for the employer, it's pretty low risk, right? Because even though they're guaranteeing employment, it's an at-will employee when they hire them. And so if they're no good, then they have the ability to let them go just like anyone else. They're not guaranteed they will keep them employed. They're just guaranteeing that they will hire them upon graduation. And so, their downside is, well, I hired someone who didn't work out, and so I had to let them go. The upside is they get the best entry level employee they've ever had and are helping to seed a source of job ready, essentially a job ready entry level workforce that will, grow and give them the types of entry level employees that they've been looking for decades, but have not been receiving necessarily. And so that's kind of been the strategy. Now, like I had mentioned, that's our go-to-market strategy, because guarantees, they don't scale, right? When we have 10,000 students, 20,000 students, we can't have 20,000 job guarantees. That just doesn't work. But the idea is that for the first 4 cohorts, give or take, we use the guarantees to get the flywheel moving. And then by that 4th or 5th or 6th cohort, we'll have the track record of excellence of what we are producing in terms of these graduates, that we won't need the guarantees anymore. We can use the track record to attract more employers to recruit and more students to come. And yeah, that's been or is our approach to the employment guarantees.
Yeah. So right now, if I understand it, cohort 1 is 4 students.
Yes. Yeah.
Is cohort 2, 3, and 4 students,
No.
or do you keep scaling up?
Yes.
Okay.
So yes. So right, because I've been to the startup rodeo a number of times now. I know the folly of launching at scale, and so I won't be making that mistake. And so so our first cohort is our minimum viable product. It's 1 product manager student, 3 software developer students, and then to your question, we'll be doubling the size of the cohort with each. So even though it's a year-long program, we're going to be launching cohorts every 6 months. And so each cohort we're going to double in size. And then so that's in terms of the cohorts for the 2 current career paths. But then it's probably starting in years 2 or 3 and beyond. That's when we start to launch other accelerators for other career paths. Again, first in technology, product design, data science, cybersecurity, product marketing, and then beyond that, and attacking other career paths in other industries. And there's one interesting thing that I mentioned offhandedly, but I didn't really touch on it, which is what I had said, that these kids graduate with mastery of the technical skills and the soft skills. And the way that our students will be able to acquire the soft skills is the only way you really can, which is by having to use them, by having to send professional Slacks and emails, or be persuasive in person, or give feedback, receive feedback. And so the way we achieve that is every single product build that is done over the course of the year is done in cross-functional teams of software developer students working with other software developer students and product manager students. And we mix up those teams throughout the year. And so through that, you can't help but develop the soft skills, because you are spending 50 hours a week, every week for a year, building commercial grade product in cross-functional teams. And I mentioned that at this moment because I talked about starting in years 2 or 3, launching additional accelerators. And so as we launch the product design accelerator and the data science and cybersecurity and product marketing ones, the students from those accelerators will be added to the product builds that the software development and product management students, were working on as the first 2 accelerators. And so ultimately, if you're a software development Pega6 student in the year 2030, every product build you do is going to be on a fully built out, proto team of, you and three other software developer students, a product manager student, two data science students, a product marketing and product design student, and a cybersecurity student, with, again, different teams throughout the year. And again, no better way to get the soft skills than that. But that's also how the cohorts grow, not just within each career path, but additional career paths as well.
Yeah, you're building mini companies.
Yeah, essentially. Yes, that's a great way to put it.
This is fascinating. I guess there's so many different directions. We could have another 4 hours, as you say, in conversation here, but I want to be sensitive to your time. I think I would love to kind of get your take today on what you think your biggest risks are to the model. Yeah, what keeps you up at night?
I would say that the biggest one is I firmly believe that once if and when we get the first cohort off the ground, it's a fait accompli from there. But the hardest one to get off the ground is the first cohort, because it's the hardest one to get the employment guarantees for. And it's not so much that there's a lot of risk to the employers, as I mentioned before, there's not. But what we are asking them to do is to guarantee a job for somebody in the summer of 2027, right? Because we're not going to launch our first cohort. The seniors from this year have to graduate in May. We'll give them a little bit of a summer, and they'll start in August 1st of 2026. But it's a year-long program, so that means they'll graduate at the end of July 2027. And so asking employers, as we've talked to employers, they're like, absolutely, we love this, but I just don't know that we can project out that far, especially with AI making changes to what career paths will exist, or who knows what. We won't know what our needs are. And so we've gotten employers to commit, but it's harder than I think we were initially expecting, simply because of that time lag for the first cohort. Now, for all future cohorts, the furthest off that their cohort will be, or that the graduates will be, is 6 months from working for the employer. But this first one, with it being 20 months, it takes a certain kind of employer in order to do the employment guarantee.
Yeah, it feels like, I get it. It's a little ways off for them, and I mean, they think in quarters. So even if it's an extra quarter long, that's an eternity, right? You could upend your entire business strategy in 3 weeks, let alone a quarter. So that makes a lot of sense. At the same time, a lot of the larger employers that they they do visit college campuses and do recruitment events and stuff like this on a regular basis. And so if you're sort of guaranteeing a slot, if they're guaranteeing a slot to one, that's today one fewer student that they're having to go to the trouble and effort to try and recruit as well. So I see how this potentially works. And to your point, it is sort of your biggest risk getting out of the box right now. And then what is the parent or the student's biggest risk in their minds? What are they saying to you? What is holding them off, or what creates the hesitancy on their side?
Yeah, the only thing was, will employers accept this as valid? Because they love the model that we bring to the table. Yeah, right. Start your career 3 years early and $350,000 ahead, and be job ready from day one. So they love it. The only risk factor that they've brought up is, will employers accept this? And that's why, again, the employment guarantees. But otherwise, now again, this would not have been the case if I had tried this when I originally had the idea 15 years ago. It just wouldn't have worked. The parents weren't ready, the students weren't ready, the employers weren't ready. And so it just would not have worked, which is why I didn't do it, as much as I loved the idea even back then. But it's because there has been such a sea change, where 50% of parents don't want to send their kids to college. 50% of kids don't want to go to college. A huge percentage of employers are doing skills-based hiring now. The market's just ready. And so, yeah, to your question, the parents, the only thing they want to make sure is that the other side of the market, the employers, are ready. And that's what the employment guarantees should do. And what we've also done, sort of a lower level commit for employers, is we've said, hey, we're starting to build out this section of the website where we just say, hey, these employers say they'd absolutely hire a Pega6 grad, right? So even if they can't give a guarantee, if we can get employers just saying, yeah, no, this is a totally valid path, then that's an additional way to give parents comfort that that employers are liking what we're producing or what we're going to be producing.
Wow, this is great. Um, I think we can leave it there, Jeremy. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this conversation today. I look forward to seeing your success. I think, as somebody who advocates in the higher ed space for higher ed and also for innovation in higher ed, um, I think there's room for you to have a ton of success and for it to actually also motivate um, a lot of higher ed institutions to really think differently about their value proposition and how they need to transform by knowing that your success uh, is out there. So um, thanks again for taking the time, and I look forward to maybe having a round two on this once you've had your first cohort in.
No, absolutely. I appreciate the time, Darin. It's been fun, and looking forward to that follow-up podcast.